please join me in giving Deroy Murdock a warm Pachyderm Club welcome.
Well, thank you very much, John, for that introduction. Thank you to Raul Brito and the other folks associated with the Bastiat Society for the invitation to be here. George Pearson, who I've known for many years as a trustee of the Atlas Network, also known as the Atlas Economic Research Foundation, has been encouraging me to come visit Wichita, so I'm here in part thanks to his invitation and encouragement. And I want to say thank you to the Pachyderm Club for hosting me here today, and for hosting all of us. I want to say thank you to the the Petroleum Club of Wichita. And to all of you, thank you very much. I realize that you're normally a lunch club, and right now we're a breakfast club. And this morning when the alarm clock went off, you guys had a choice between two things. One was to hit the snooze button, and the other was to be here today. So thank you for picking me over the snooze button. I appreciate that very much. I was taking a look at the newsletter here as we're getting ready this morning. This is the Kansas Independent Petroleum Industry newsletter. They had an interesting little news item in here I'll share with you. It mentions and quotes a brand new study from Texas A&M University that ranked the presidents of the United States. And the conclusion was that Obama is the fifth best president of the United States among the 44 men who've served in that office. Ronald Reagan and Abraham Lincoln were tied for first. 17 presidents were tied for second. 23 other presidents were tied for third. Jimmy Carter came in fourth, and Obama was fifth. So, let me move this on. There we go. There we go. I want to say thank you as well to Manhattan financier Brett A. Schisler, my best friend in New York, for his research and graphic contribution to his presentation. Now, we're going to talk today on the topic of 3 cheers for the 1%, and I know probably what you're thinking is that here's some rich guy from New York City who's here to give a big spirited public defense of his vast petroleum, real estate, and lumber empire. Well, you guessed right. In fact, there's where I live. That's my home right there. Maybe someday you can come over and visit. This is actually the Biltmore Estate in Asheville, North Carolina. Beautiful place, and recommend you visit sometime. This is my estate right here. I live right, there you go. That's my estate right there. That's my apartment. Not quite the Biltmore, but it's where what I call home. So now you're thinking, okay, well, maybe he's here to defend his inherited wealth, what my mom and dad have been able to put together over the years, and looking forward to hearing that. And of course, his mom and dad's house. This is another Vanderbilt property. This is the Breakers in Newport, Rhode Island. Beautiful place. I recommend you visit. But unfortunately, I went in and walked around in the night to leave once the place closed. This is where my mom and dad lives. A much more modest home in Temecula, California, which is about an hour north of San Diego. That's where they've retired. And the car you see out front there, that's my rental car. That is not a Ferrari. That's a Ford Focus. So let's give you a sense of the demographic you're dealing with when you hear me speak. And if you happen to watch Fox News or Fox Television, you may remember or recognize that home, the Simpsons home in Springfield, which looks oddly enough like my mom and dad's house. Also, if you watch The Simpsons, you're familiar with C. Montgomery Burns, the man who owns the nuclear power plant, the richest man in town. And here he's reading a newspaper that says 1% recovering nicely from recession, 99% not so much. And his response is, excellent. And this is sort of the theme of the talk, this notion that these rich people, the 1%, those who are fortunate enough to be at the top of the income distribution, are a bunch of awful, greedy, hateful monsters. And as soon as we can grab their money and give it to everyone else, America will be a much better country. And you see this throughout American political rhetoric these days all over the place. You certainly saw it, here, this is something you see back in the 1930s, and this is reminiscent of the kind of talk that you would have heard back among Marxist-Leninists back at the time Stalin was doing his thing in the Kremlin. And here you see the big brawny hands of the worker using a pickaxe to go after this wealthy capitalist wearing a top hat. You always see this theme of wealthy capitalists wearing top hats. You saw it as well here when Mitt Romney was running for president, multimillionaire with top hats. I'm fortunate enough to know a lot of wealthy people, and they don't wear top hats. I just don't see that. But this is part of the stereotype. So here's Mitt Romney 2 years ago campaigning, wearing his spats, of course, with his lovely tuxedo there, and he's kicking the worker right in the behind there as he's carrying his lunchbox. This is this class warfare theme that you see. here in this Rolling Stone cover, and we see way too much in American political rhetoric in a country where you wouldn't think you'd see this sort of thing. And unfortunately, it starts at the top. Then candidate Obama saying, I think when you spread the wealth around, it's good for everybody. So let's take the money and sprinkle around for everyone. I do think at a certain point, you've made enough money, Obama said. A rather ominous comment, I think. The debt ceiling should not be something that is used as a gun against the heads of the American people to extract tax breaks for corporate jet owners, said Obama, as he's standing in front of course, the most famous corporate jet in the world. This whole rhetoric against corporate jets got so bad that the head of the machinists union said, Mr. President, those jets don't build themselves. We build those jets, my unionized machinist members. So would you please stop attacking the products that are made by unionized machinists, probably here in Wichita. I know that you do a lot of that work right here in this city. If asking a millionaire to pay the same tax rate as a plumber makes me a class warrior, a warrior for the working class, I will accept that. I will wear that charge as a badge of honor, Obama said. An incredibly, incredibly divisive thing you wouldn't expect to hear out of the mouth of the President of the United States. If you've got a business, you didn't build that. Somebody else made that happen. One of the most notorious comments to come out of the mouth of this notorious man. And we have Bernie Sanders, a socialist of Vermont. Socialist is his term, not mine. When the rich get richer, they say, I'm not rich enough. I need to be richer. What motivates some of these people is greed and more greed. Also from Bernie Sanders, greed is, in my view, like a sickness. It is like an addiction. We know people on heroin, they can't stop. They need more and more, said Bernie Sanders. Rich Trumka, president of the AFL-CIO. For years, the Koch brothers have epitomized how corporations and super rich have tried to systematically destroy our democracy. I know the Koch brothers are local heroes and heroes of mine, even though I don't live here. And they, of course, are one of the big targets of this whole attack on wealthy people. The Koch brothers, the most monstrous people in America, according to people on the left. Here's Michael Moore, a guy who's been sliding by in his good looks for the last 30 years or so. They're sitting on the money. That's not theirs. That's a national resource. That's ours. So it's not even their money. It's our money. It's sort of an act of sort of rhetorical nationalization. This is a rapper by the name of Boots Riley from the San Francisco Bay Area. He wrote a rap song called 5 Million Ways to Kill a CEO. And here's a selection. Toss $1 in the river, and when he jump in, if you find he can swim, put lead boots on him and do it again. How about that? So we don't just attack them, now we're killing these people. This lovely lady is Karen Lewis. She's president of the Chicago Teachers Union. And she said that we're in a moment where the wealth disparity in this country is very reminiscent of the robber baron ages. The labor leaders at that time, though, were ready to kill. They were just ready. They were like off with their heads. The rich think nothing about killing us. They're thinking about putting our people in harm's way. They think nothing about lethal working conditions. And by lethal working conditions, she's referring to teachers in Chicago schools, some of whom have non-air conditioned classrooms. So those are the brutal Dickensian conditions to which she referred. So again, the idea is to kill these people. Then we have Roseanne Barr, and she said that I first would allow the guilty bankers the ability to pay back anything over $100 million personal wealth because I believe in a maximum wage of $100 million. And if they're unable to live on that amount, then they should go to re-education camps. And if that doesn't help, then we behead them. So off with their heads. So we go from class warfare to decapitation, sort of the Robespierre model. This is a little graffito across the street from me on a construction site. Every time a bank fails, an angel gets its wings. Eat the rich, the other white meat. Kill and eat the rich. Not just eat them. Here we got knives and forks. And so this rhetoric gets very ugly and nasty. How about this? Class war. We've found new homes for the rich under grave markers. Now imagine if this said, we've found new homes for the blacks, or new homes for the Jews, or new homes for the gays, with these crosses in the cemetery. People would be outraged. They'd find out who said this or who put these posters up. It'd be the end of their careers, and they would be excoriated, and deservedly so. But you can run around this country and say, we found new homes for the rich, and indicate that they're all 6 feet under. People think, oh, that's appropriate rhetoric. And this is the kind of thing we should not be using or saying or tolerating in this country. This is totally un-American and totally inappropriate to this country. Burn the rich, the condos. And you see right here this anarchy sign right there. And unfortunately, the thing about this kind of hateful rhetoric is some people take it to heart and think, let's act on that. Let's see if we can make this sort of thing happen. This is November 2010. An arsonist in a place called Sandwich, Massachusetts. Went up to a home under construction, a $500,000 home, set it on construction. The house burned to the ground. And then just a few days later, according to the Cape Cod Times, an incendiary device was found in another wealthy home in this area, right in the same neighborhood. And unfortunately, the incendiary device did not go off, so the house was not damaged, but there was attempted arson. And in both the place that burned and the place where the attempted arson took place, somebody wrote F the rich, spray painted there. So this was a class warfare type attack, one successful, one attempted. This is a case of a man by the name of Clay Duke who went to a school board meeting in Florida, and he was incensed about certain things. He went to the school board, and here he is holding the school board at gunpoint. And if you look carefully, you see that anarchy sign there, which he spray painted on the wall right before he pulled his gun out. And then he pulled the trigger, and there you can see the bullet discharging. Fortunately, the people involved were able to duck and were not hurt, and then he turned the gun on himself. But somebody went online and found his online manifesto, and he said, I was just born poor in a country where the wealthy manipulate, use, abuse, and economically enslave 95% of the population. Our masters, the wealthy, do as they please to us. So this was, again, more of this class warfare type violence. There was an outbreak of fires in London a couple years back. You may recall, I think August, it was in the summertime, and there were tremendous fires all across London. This was a family-owned business that was opened about 1850, a furniture manufacturing company and a warehouse and showroom, and the arsonists came in and set it ablaze. You had about 150, 160 years of family wealth go up in smoke. This woman was in her apartment, which was set fire. She jumped out of the window and was rescued by people on the street, so she came very close to losing her life in these fires. And so the BBC asked some of these anarchists, what are you doing? Why are you setting these fires? And one of them said, we're just showing rich people we can do what we want. So this idea gets in people's heads, and things start to burn, and people get injured. This is a bridge in Ohio, over this nice, lovely river there. And these delightful guys here, these good-looking guys, were brought in, arrested in an alleged plot to blow up that bridge in the Cleveland area. Real savory-looking characters. Well, it turns out, guess what? They're part of the Occupy movement. And these anarchists, three of them were employees of Occupy Cleveland, and they wanted, quote, to make sure everyone knows that the action was against corporate America and the financial system and not just some random acts. They were caught in the effort to blow this bridge up. Fortunately, they were prevented from doing so. Now, when I talk about being good to the 1%, I'm not talking about people like Bernie Madoff. This is Bernie Madoff being marched off to jail. This man is a thief. This man is a criminal. This man stole something around $60 billion with a B, and he right now is in, as the Soviets used to say, the Soviet dissidents used to say, a guest of the state. And he will remain a guest of the state until the day he dies, and that's totally appropriate. So he's rotting in jail now, which is where he should be and where people like him should be. So I'm not talking about the 1% when I'm talking about this guy. I'm also not talking about corporate welfare and bailouts. We had a tremendous slew of bailouts after the meltdown of 2008, 2009. I believe in capitalism on the way up and capitalism on the way down. Unfortunately, we have in this country capitalism on the way up and socialism on the way down. So if you make profits, you enjoy them privately. If you have losses, you socialize them, and we all get to absorb them. That's not my economic model. Unfortunately, it's the economic model under which we live today. If you're part of the 1% and you earn it, great. And if you lose it, well, suck it up. Don't run to the taxpayers looking for help. I'm also not talking about corporate welfare, which you see in so many parts of this country. If you're in the peanut business, the ethanol industry, or the sugar industry, for starters, if you're in any of these three businesses, they're very intervened upon by the federal government with tremendous subsidies and loopholes and tax benefits and so on. And my view is if you're in any industry, you ought to be pulling your own weight rather than expecting the taxpayers to do so. So I'm not defending that when I talk about the 1%. Now, this is James Clyburn. He's I think basically number 2 or 3 right under Nancy Pelosi among the Democrats in the House. He's a congressman from South Carolina. He's quite focused on this issue. And he says 90% of the American people are carrying this tax load, while the other 2% seem to be getting away scot-free, and that's not fair. Now, what's amazing about this comment is he has it almost completely upside down. I mean, this guy's he's standing on his head when he looks at the world, because what he describes is just completely not so. The exact opposite happens to be true. When we talk about the 1%, who are we talking about? These are people with a minimum AGI of $389,000 and an average adjusted gross income of about $1.14 million. So that's the technical economic definition of the 1% in 2011. These numbers, by the way, are the most recent I could find according to the IRS. There's usually a bit of a 2 or 3 year lag on most of these things. So here are the top 1% of the income distribution. The top 1% in the year 2011 made 19% of national income, or 19% of overall AGI. And they paid 35% of income tax. So when people say that the 1% are not paying their quote-unquote fair share, I'm thinking, okay, here are the 1% of filers. They make 19% national income. They're paying 35% of income taxes. It seems to me that they're paying more than their fair share. They're paying more than their fair share. Almost double, actually. You take a look, I don't know if you can quite see this, it's a little bit small, but take a look at income tax revenue for the year 2011. The total income tax brought in just a little bit over $1 trillion in the year 2011. Of that, the top 1% paid 300, and I can't quite see that with the blur and the shrinkage there. 366, that number, 366, about 35%. So that one group with 1% paid 35% of that income tax. You look at the bottom 50%, the lower half of the income distribution, and that's about 30 billion. So it looks to me like these guys are paying more than their fair share, and these guys are paying less than their fair share. Although you never hear that from all this rhetoric, which is that the rich just don't pay taxes. Well, that's just not true. Some people say, all right, well, that's income tax. How about all the other taxes? Because working class people pay payroll taxes. Well, you take a look at income tax, payroll tax, corporate tax, and death taxes. Here again, you find that wealthy people pay more taxes. If you add those 4 taxes up, whoops, you've got this small amount being paid by people making $20,000, $30,000. If you're making more than $1 million, you're paying an effective tax rate of 31% versus about 5.5 there. So basically, the more money you make, the more tax you make, despite the rhetoric you hear to the contrary. So when politicians tell you rich people aren't paying taxes, they are lying to you. They're not misleading you or trying to deceive you. They're lying, and they need to be called out for exactly that. Another interesting aspect of this is that about half the country just doesn't pay income tax. They're just not involved in this. They don't have skin in the game in that regard. Yes, they do pay a payroll tax, they pay Social Security tax, but income tax is something not paid by about half the country right now. And I think there's a mistake that tax cutters like Ronald Reagan and others have made, where they've said, all right, we've just reformed the taxes, we've lowered the rates, and now another 10 million people aren't paying taxes. This is a very dangerous situation, because eventually we're going to get to the point where you're going to have 51% of the people voting and having 49% of them picking up the bills. And when that happens, I think you end up on a slippery slope that ends up with a socialized economy, when people realize they can show up at the polls and basically vote to spend other people's money. What I prefer instead is a tax rate, what I call the 0, 10, 100 plan. 0 deductions, no deductions at all. 10%, 10 is the tax rate, 10%. And 100 is what is the number of people who pay. Everybody pays. Everyone has skin in the game. Everybody pays something. Now you might pay, a small amount in taxes. You may get a lot more in public benefits, but everyone has to pay something. Everybody's got skin in the game. It's everybody's government. And with a 10% tax, I think it's low enough so everyone participates. You have a lot less people putting money offshore and doing a lot of other things like that. And I think you get a much simpler tax code you could put on 1 or 2 pages rather than about 68,000 pages with the current tax code today. So this sort of sums it up. This is Obama saying, I won't allow the half of Americans who pay no taxes to bear the burden of the other half who aren't paying their fair share. So if that makes sense to you, you understand this problem. Now, who are these 1%? Again, the Koch brothers and these awful industrialists, these people who are polluting and on, these awful bad actors. Well, guess what? Interesting people who are members of the 1%, which again, people making $389,000 and up. Former chief of staff to Obama, Jack Lew, when he was at Citicorp, he was making $1.1 million. Chief of staff William Daley, former Obama chief of staff when he was at J.P. Morgan Chase before he joined the government, $8.7 million. And then Rahm Emanuel, who left the White House and went on to even greater things as mayor of Chicago before he joined the Obama White House. He was at Wasserstein Perella and Company making $16.2 million. So a lot of these people who yell about the 1% ought to look in the mirror because they're part of the 1%. And very comfortably so. Here again is our old friend Bernie Sanders here. And he's saying these people are worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Maybe they've got to go back to the Bible or whatever they believe in, understanding that there is virtue in sharing, in reaching out, that you can't get it all. And this theme is that these greedy people who make 1%, they keep the money, they hog it, they put it under their mattresses, and they don't share. They just hang on to this cash with a tremendous sense of avarice and selfishness and greed. Well, there's a very interesting study that comes out every other year put out by U.S. Trust U.S. Trust and Bank of America together, as well as the School of Philanthropy at Indiana University. And it's called the U.S. Trust Study of High Net Worth Philanthropy. It comes out every other year. This is the most recent edition that came out last month. And again, it's a joint venture of U.S. Trust and Bank of America and the Lilly Family School of Philanthropy at Indiana University. And excuse me, every 2 years they look at the giving patterns of very wealthy Americans. Specifically, this is the result of a survey given to 632 U.S. households with a net worth of $1 million or more, excluding the value of their homes, annual household income of $200,000 or more. And the average respondent in this survey had a net worth of $14.9 million. So these are people with $15 million in the bank on average. These are very wealthy people. 632 of them talk about their giving patterns. So let's see how the wealthy people, these awful, mean, nasty 1% people, did in terms of hogging their money. Well, it turns out, did you give to charity last year? It turns out that among these rich people, 98.4% of them did. Almost all of them gave to charity, versus 65% among the general population. So these are very generous people, significantly more generous than average Americans. Where did this money go? Education, number one. They gave lots of money to schools, to their local schools, to their colleges and universities, etc. Number two, basic needs. This is the Salvation Army. These are homeless shelters. This is the Goodwill. These are efforts to help people at the very bottom of the ladder, people who really, really need help, and they provided a lot of help as their secondary source. Number three, the arts. Yes, these people do give money to museums and the ballet and the symphony and all that, but they worry about the ballet and the symphony in places where wealthy and affluent people gather for recreation after they've worried about making sure people are educated and making sure that those with the least among us have some effort to try to relieve their discomfort and hopefully move up. Now, not only you can sit at your desk and write a check and drop it in the mail and then go back to your greedy hedge fund or your greedy petroleum company or whatever it is, but these people don't just write checks. These people actually volunteer. Fully 75% of them volunteer and actually show up, roll up their sleeves, and help these charities that they support. In fact, 34% of them right here donate at least 200 hours. So 200 hours or more. I think the average is not quite calculated, but somewhere in the 225, 240 a day range. They're donating fully something like 8 to 10 full days a year of volunteer time. So we're not talking about a little drop by for a meet and greet photo opportunity. These are people showing up and serving on boards, showing up and serving at events, and actually putting in time. And we're making that kind of money, and you've got yourself a successful petroleum company or hedge fund or whatever it may be. Your time is money, and so when they volunteer time, they're in essence are donating a lot of money as well. We're talking about people like Ken Langone. Ken Langone is one of the co-founders of Home Depot. He also is on the board of directors of the New York Stock Exchange. Very wealthy man who lives in New York City, who's a multi-billionaire. He gave $200 million to New York University to build things like this new medical center, which is right on the East River. $200 million to NYU. No strings, one string attached, only one string. He said, "I want my name on the front door." So it's now known as the Langone NYU Medical Center. Other than that, he said, "Spend the money as you wish." His money is now being used to train medical students, being used for medical research and innovation, cure diseases, take care of sick people. Again, one string attached. Please put my name on the door. Other than that, do what you want with $200 million. You may recognize this face, one of your neighbors, David Koch, again, attacked by the left as one of the worst people in America. An incredibly generous man, as is his brother, as is his family. He's given, personally, I think $600 million or so to medical research to cure cancer, among many other things, many other gifts that the Kochs have made to a wide variety of charities over the years. And including in New York City, this is the inside of what used to be called the New York State Theater at Lincoln Center. David Koch gave, I think, about $100 million or so to renovate and modernize the New York State Theater at Lincoln Center. It's now known as the David H. Koch Theater, and there you can see what this beautiful place looks like after the renovations were done with David Koch's money. You'll go back in history and you see people such as this man here, Andrew Carnegie, responsible for a little place called Carnegie Hall, right at the corner of 7th Avenue and 57th Street. It's one of the great meccas of the arts in America. This cheerful-looking guy here is Andrew Mellon, Secretary of the Treasury under Calvin Coolidge, a great tax cutter, among other things. And Andrew Mellon was concerned when he was Secretary of Treasury that people would come visit from around the world and say, I'd love to go to your National Art Museum. And at the time he said, well, we don't have one. I've got some friends with some artwork. We can go visit my pals and look at their art collections. So he thought it was unfortunate that in America's capital we didn't have a national art gallery. So what he did is donated a lot of money, donated a lot of artwork, and got his friends to do so. And here you have the National Gallery of Art on the Mall as part of the Smithsonian. He actually picked out this slightly pink marble to build the beginning of the National Gallery of Art. And here's Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who said, the giver of this building has matched the richness of its gift with the modesty of his spirit, stipulating that the gallery shall be known not by his name, but by the nation's. That's why it's the National Gallery of Art, not the Mellon Gallery of Art. So that when next time you see that building, that was a gift of Andrew Mellon. Now, not all these are nice people. This is Henry Ford, great industrialist. Not a particularly nice guy. Happened to be quite an anti-Semite, unfortunately, and apparently quite an ordinary character. But despite his dark heart and dark soul, he did a lot of good for a whole lot of people. For one thing he did was create the Model T. Before the invention of the Model T, most Americans were born, lived their lives, and died within probably 20 miles of wherever they lived. People didn't move around very much. With the advent of the Model T, the average American, not the wealthy person who could buy a beautiful Daimler-Benz cruising kind of car, could get a Model T at an affordable price, get on the road and drive around, and mobility became something completely central to the American character, thanks to Henry Ford and the Model T. He also created quite a number of industrial applications and mechanisms, including the assembly line. That was something that applied not just to cars, but across the board to manufacturing, something that was a creation of Henry Ford, which benefited our entire country. It created jobs for thousands and thousands and thousands of people. This is a Ford plant in Detroit, but in addition to this Ford plant with all these people working for him, there were Ford facilities for manufacturing and distributing and repairing and selling cars, and these people benefited from his industry. And of course, we went from Model T to this beautiful car, this Mustang you see here, which is what Ford produces today. Now, what do they do with all this money? Ford could have been very greedy, pocketed all this money and kept it in his own bank account. What he did towards the end of his life was start the Ford Foundation. This is the Ford Foundation's headquarters on 42nd Street, very close to the UN in Manhattan. Beautiful building if you ever get a chance to visit. And here's his son, Edsel Ford, after whom the Edsel is named. And back in 1930s, the Ford Foundation was begun in Michigan with a gift of $25,000, which they invested very well. And the charge of the Ford Foundation was use the money from the Ford Foundation, from Ford family rather, and use it, quote, all for the public welfare, unquote. They went on to provide seed money for Lincoln Center back in the late 50s. They put up money to fight racial discrimination with groups like La Raza and MALDEF, the Mexican-American Legal Defense and Education Foundation. They put up money in the 1980s for gender equity studies at women's colleges and women's studies programs around the U.S. 1983, they gave money to 283 public radio stations across the country. And they gave money for HIV/AIDS research in 2010 and subsequently $25 million in that one particular case. Now, as I mentioned those causes, you didn't hear me talking about the Ford Foundation giving money to the Pachyderm Club, to the Bastiat Society, the Cato Institute, the Heritage Foundation. They don't tend to support groups like those, or the Atlas Network. The Ford Foundation is basically the piggy bank, or the Fort Knox of the left. I think that would probably drive Henry Ford crazy, but if you're a left-wing group, you go to the Ford Foundation. They give away a lot of money to generally center-left causes rather than center-right causes. In fact, last year they gave $525 million, almost $500 million given away by the Ford Foundation last year. And they would not have been able to do that had it not been for the capitalism of Henry Ford early on. In fact, Henry Ford II was very bothered by this. He was on the board of the Ford Foundation, and he got tired of the lack of gratitude, this whole kind of anti-1% class warfare perspective of the staff. And he said, the Ford Foundation exists and thrives on the fruits of our economic system. The dividends of competitive enterprise make it all possible. A significant portion of the abundance created by United States business enables the foundation and like institutions to carry on their work. In effect, the foundation is a creature of capitalism, a statement that I'm sure would be shocking to many professional staff people in the field of philanthropy, unquote, said Henry Ford II. He wrote this in his resignation letter as he resigned from the board of the Ford Foundation, as a matter of fact. Now, what's kind of fun with the 1% people? They go on the streets and protest these awful corporations and down to the corporations and so on. Somebody took a picture of these people and pointed out that when they put their picket signs, the black markers made by Sharpie, the bags they're carrying made by Eddie Bauer, all the cameras are by Canon, Weyerhaeuser produces the poster board for their picket signs and so on. So these people are all against corporations. But if it weren't for corporations, these people would be walking around down the street naked. And at the bottom it says, we deserve more from these greedy corporations. Join us afterwards at Starbucks. The left is very, very, very driven by the idea of equality. It's all about equality. We want everyone to be equal. It's all about equality. Not equality before the law, which I think we all share, the idea that the government should treat us all equally, but the results should be the same. Everybody should end up equal. I put this picture up here. This is from Great Britain in the late 1930s. On the left, we have a young John Cleese, who went on to great things as a member of Monty Python's Flying Circus. And these two comedians over here are known as the two Ronnies. And this is just to illustrate the idea that we don't all end up equal. We all end up looking differently, end up with different circumstances. And it's one thing to be for equality before the law. If you want equal results, it would make just as much sense as sawing off John Cleese's legs and then attaching stilts to Ronnie Corbett, I think is his name here on the left, so they all end up the same. But the left spends a lot of time trying to make sure we all not end up at the same height or end up with the same stuff through all these government collection and redistribution and subsidy mechanisms and so on. And it's really a fool's errand, I think. Here again is our friend James Clyburn. He says, the gap continues to grow wider between those who enjoy great wealth and those who struggle to get by with little thought of ever getting ahead. It's all about the income gap. They're obsessed with the income gap. Instead of believing that a rising tide lifts all boats, class warriors act as if they want to drain the lake so all the boats are equally grounded. I think these people would be happier if we all were equally miserable than if we had some people more prosperous, although some people would be better off than others. Which European country recorded the biggest decrease in equality between 1985 and 2008? Anybody know? Well, that would be Greece. How's Greece look to you, folks? So Greece, to their wonderful advantage, they have a lot less inequality than they used to. They also have riots and Molotov cocktails, an economy that's going nowhere. Now, I like to use this when I talk to college kids and talk to law students through the Federal Society and Young America's Foundation, other groups. And I like to go through this thought experiment, which deals with the whole income gap concept. Let's say you're about to graduate from law school and you're looking at two job offers. Job offer A, you make $50,000 and your boss makes $55,000. That's an income gap of 10%. And I think even the most hardened Occupy Wall Street activists would say, yeah, that's okay. That sounds equal enough. Okay, that's job offer B. Job offer A. Here's job offer B. You make $500,000. Your boss makes $1 million. That greedy SOB in the corner office is making twice what you are. That's an income gap of 100%. You think of anything more unfair and unjust than that? All right, all those for job offer A? All those for job offer B? How about that? How about that? So maybe it's not the income gap that ought to be our concern. Maybe the concern rather should be, what is the income floor and how do we get that higher? Why don't we as a society focus on getting the floor up rather than bringing the penthouse down? I think we'd have a very constructive discussion in this country about how we get poor people and make them wealthier. How do we educate them? How do we provide them with more opportunities? How do we get more regulatory and other legal and other hurdles out of the way so they can prosper and do well and everybody get ahead? I think a very destructive conversation, one which is not good for our country, is how do we get that guy in the penthouse and drag him down to the lobby and throw him in the street? And unfortunately, too much of our rhetoric and too much of our political energy in this country is focused on the latter rather than the former. Winston Churchill, a very wise man, said, the inherent vice of capitalism is the unequal sharing of blessings. The inherent virtue of socialism is the equal sharing of miseries. I think it puts it very, very well. Anybody know what that is? That is the Korean Peninsula by day from a satellite. If you were in the space shuttle looking down at the Korean Peninsula, that's what that looks like in the daytime. Here's how the Korean Peninsula looks at night. Okay, so you've got the land of inequality here with Seoul thriving. I think Busan is down here. And here in Seoul, you've got people who are rich and poor. You've got people in penthouses. You have people in modest studio apartments. You've got income inequality. Well, here in North Korea, people are pretty equal. Okay? So you got the land of inequality and you got the land of equality. And if you look if you look right there, there's a little bit of a dot of light where I guess Kim Jong-un's palace is. I guess he's staying up late at night with his friends or something like that. So I like to show people if you don't if all the rest of that presentation made no sense to you, just focus on this. I think this puts it all pretty well.
China across the border don't have any lightning either.
This is true. Now, I think if you looked at China up here, right in that area, I don't think there's much development there. If you took a picture of Guangzhou, Shanghai, Beijing, Xi'an, those other places in China, I think they'd be quite bright. And what's interesting about China is they are not a full-blown capitalist country, to be sure. They're still, at least technically on paper, a communist country, but they've gone from full-blown Maoist communism to something now which is some kind of a mixed economy, and they have done a lot better. I think we take for granted the notion that China has moved along in the last 30 years. If you'd gone to China 30 years ago today, people were still wearing Mao jackets. They didn't have much to do all day long. They rode bicycles, and it probably looked a lot like that. One generation later, China's paying our bills. If it weren't for China, who would buy our national debt? They're keeping the lights on. One generation it took to do that. And again, not going from full communism to full-blown capitalism, but just getting the boot off people's necks to a degree, and look at all the progress that they've been able to achieve in just a really matter of 25, 30 years as a consequence of that.
The media tells us that they are economically ahead of us. Is that right?
Are they economically ahead of us? I think that according to some measures, either this year or next year, their GDP might be higher than ours. I don't know if that's happened this year, but the thought is that in the next year or two, we may become the #2 economy in the world after China, believe it or not. These words are attributed to Abraham Lincoln. There's some debate about whether he said this or not. But anyway, you cannot strengthen the weak by weakening the strong. You cannot help the poor man by destroying the rich. You cannot further the brotherhood of man by inciting class hatred. Wise words then, wise words today. Thank you very much.